Stop whatever you are doing right now because what I'm about to tell you could change everything you thought you knew about the Pacific Northwest. Last night at exactly 10:23 p.m., sensors buried deep beneath the Pacific Ocean floor picked up something that made scientists across the country lose sleep. Something shifted down there in the cold, crushing darkness beneath a mile of ocean water, and it was not supposed to happen for another year. The most dangerous underwater volcano in North America just hit 95% inflation, the exact same deadly threshold that triggered a massive eruption back in 2015. But here's the terrifying part that nobody's talking about. This was supposed to happen in late 2026. Not now, not this early. The timeline has completely shattered, and the scientists who correctly predicted the last eruption are now publicly admitting they have no idea what's going on. If you care about the West Coast, if you have family in Oregon, Washington, or California, you need to watch this entire video because what I am about to reveal could affect millions of lives. Smash that subscribe button right now and hit the notification bell because this story is developing fast and you do not want to miss a single update. All right, let me break this down for you because most people have never even heard of this volcano, and that is exactly what makes it so dangerous. About 300 miles off the coast of Oregon, hidden beneath nearly a mile of Pacific Ocean water, sits a volcanic monster called Axial Seamount. This thing rises 3,600 feet from the ocean floor, making it roughly the same size as Mount Rainier, and it is one of the most active volcanoes in all of North America. But because it sits underwater where nobody can see it, most Americans have no clue it even exists. That is a huge problem because Axial is not just some random underwater hill minding its own business. This volcano sits directly on top of something called the Juan de Fuca Ridge, which is basically a giant crack in the earth where new oceanic crust forms. Magma constantly wells up from deep within the Earth's mantle at this location, feeding this massive volcanic structure that has been building for thousands of years. Now here is where things get really interesting and honestly pretty scary. Axial Seamount does not erupt like the volcanoes you see in movies with dramatic explosions and ash clouds. Instead, it breathes. I know that sounds weird, but stay with me here. This volcano inflates and deflates like a massive underground lung, slowly filling with molten rock over years, and then releasing that pressure in a sudden eruption. Dr. Bill Chadwick, a geologist from Oregon State University who has studied Axial for decades, explained that the volcano typically inflates to about the same level each time before an eruption gets triggered. This predictable pattern allowed his team to successfully forecast the last eruption in 2015. They literally told everyone the volcano would erupt before the year ended, and sure enough, it did exactly that. But that consistency they relied on for years has suddenly vanished into thin air. The inflation that should have taken years is now happening in mere months. The magma is surging upward at unprecedented rates. The cycle that scientists trusted and understood is breaking down right before their eyes. The 2025 seismic chain reaction. So what the heck happened to throw everything off schedule? Well, buckle up because this is where the story gets wild. On July 29, 2025, a massive 8.8 magnitude earthquake struck off the coast of Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. This was an absolute monster of a quake, and it sent seismic waves racing across the entire Pacific Basin at the speed of a commercial jet airliner. Now you might think, okay, Russia is really far away. What does that have to do with a volcano off the Oregon coast? Here is the thing. Those seismic waves traveled 4,000 miles across the Pacific and slammed directly into Axial Seamount. The pressure sensors on the seafloor went absolutely haywire. Within hours, earthquakes started rippling through the volcano's magma chamber. The inflation rate doubled, then it tripled. Scientists watching the data could not believe what they were seeing, but the hits kept coming. Just a few months later, in November 2025, another massive earthquake struck, this time from 2,400 miles to the south. A 7.9 magnitude quake hammered the Tonga Trench, generating a tsunami that swept across the South Pacific. And once again, Axial shuddered as those seismic waves arrived at its doorstep. Fresh lava erupted onto the seafloor, but this was just a preview of what was coming. By the end of November, the volcano's inflation rate had quadrupled. What should have taken an entire year was now happening in a matter of weeks. Then came the knockout punch. On December 8th, a swarm of earthquakes rattled something called the Blanco Fracture Zone, which is a massive fault system that cuts across the Juan de Fuca Ridge, just 60 miles from Axial. The seismographs on the summit recorded over 2,000 earthquakes in just 24 hours, with a dozen of them reaching magnitude 4.0 or higher. Picture a slow-motion hammer blow striking the volcano over and over again. That is essentially what happened, and it completely shattered the predictable pattern scientists had relied on for years. By December 20th, Axial's inflation had topped 95%, hitting the exact same level that triggered the massive 2015 eruption. But this time, it was happening a full 10 months ahead of schedule. The clock that was supposed to tick toward late 2026 had suddenly started sprinting toward a geological catastrophe that nobody saw coming. To really understand why this acceleration is so alarming, we need to take a quick trip back in time. In May 1933, a United States Navy subchaser was patrolling off the Oregon coast when something extraordinary happened. The ship's log, which was lost for decades in naval archives, recorded that the crew was awakened by a strange light at 5 a.m. They picked up several pieces of volcanic rock floating in the water with gaseous bubbles coming out of them. That log entry, buried and forgotten for years, turned out to be the first known record of an eruption at Axial Seamount. Scientists now believe that the 1933 event was a massive submarine lava flow that poured across the seafloor, building an underwater plateau larger than the city of San Francisco. But the true power of Axial's eruptive cycle stayed hidden until July 1998, when seafloor seismometers recorded a massive swarm of earthquakes. Over 8,000 earthquakes rattled the seamount in just 11 days, with some of them powerful enough to resonate through the Earth's crust and reach monitoring stations as far away as Idaho. When scientists sent a remotely operated vehicle down to investigate months later, they discovered fresh lava flows stretching for tens of meters across the seafloor. Axial had unleashed a massive eruption without anyone on the surface even knowing it happened. The pattern repeated itself in April 2011. After 13 years of steady, gradual inflation, Axial convulsed in another seismic swarm. This time, the earthquakes reached magnitudes up to 4.7. Seafloor monitoring equipment captured lava spilling from multiple vents, building new volcanic mounds towering 300 feet above the ocean floor. The 2011 lava flows covered an area 3 times larger than what happened in 1998. The volcano was getting stronger with each eruption. Then came 2015, when scientists finally witnessed Axial's power in real time. On April 23rd, the volcano's inflation reached a critical threshold, and Dr. Chadwick's team issued a bold prediction. They said Axial would erupt before the year ended. That forecast proved accurate in the most chilling way possible. Just one day later, on April 24th, seismic stations recorded a magnitude 5.2 earthquake. Then everything went ominously silent as lava severed the underwater data cables connecting the monitoring equipment to the surface. The volcanic throat had reopened, spewing molten rock across the abyss. Now here is the part that should genuinely concern everyone living on the West Coast. The answer to why this sudden destabilization is happening may lie in Axial's deepest structural roots. Beneath this underwater mountain sprawls an extensive network of subterranean dikes and sills, which are essentially magma-filled cracks that can extend for miles through the oceanic crust. These intrusions do not just feed Axial Seamount. They connect it to the rest of the Juan de Fuca Ridge system. When this volcano erupts, it is not just releasing pressure from its own magma chamber. It is tapping into a vast vascular system of molten rock that ties it to every other volcano in the Pacific Northwest. Think about that for a second. Mount Baker, Mount Rainier, Mount Hood, Mount Shasta, every major volcano in the Cascade Range draws power from the same underground network. They are all connected through this subterranean plumbing system of magma channels and pressure points. Now imagine what happens when a massive earthquake strikes near one of those magmatic veins. The shaking dislodges mineral blockages that have been building up for years, suddenly clearing the path for pent-up magma to flow rapidly upward. Suddenly, Axial's inflation does not just depend on gradual magma accumulation in its own chamber. It starts receiving a high-pressure injection from the entire network. That is exactly what scientists suspect happened throughout 2025. The Kamchatka earthquake, the Tonga rupture, and the Blanco fracture zone swarm. Each one hammered axial subsurface plumbing like a series of blows to a clogged pipe. Bottlenecks got cleared. Magma got mobilized far beyond the seamount's immediate footprint. Axial is not just inflating anymore. It is being force-fed by seismic stress transferred across thousands of miles of the Pacific Basin. The consequences of this could be absolutely catastrophic, and I am not exaggerating here. If Axial erupts on this accelerated schedule, it will not just reshape a small patch of seafloor that nobody can see. It could potentially destabilize the entire Cascadia subduction zone, which is a 600-mile-long fault system capable of unleashing magnitude 9 mega-earthquakes. Dr. William Wilcock, a geophysicist from the University of Washington, has laid out a scenario that should send chills down your spine. He explained that Axial's eruption could trigger earthquakes up and down the subduction zone, not just by transmitting seismic waves, but by fundamentally altering the stress patterns and fluid pressures along the fault. Let me paint you a picture of what this domino effect could look like. Axial's lateral dikes and sills rupture during an eruption, sending shock waves racing through the Juan de Fuca plate's brittle crust. Those fractures weaken an already unstable fault system that has been building stress for over 300 years. The subduction interface could uncouple catastrophically, unleashing a magnitude 9.3 earthquake that hammers the Pacific coast from California all the way to British Columbia. And remember those Cascade volcanoes I mentioned? Their magma has already been mobilized by axial subsurface connections. They could potentially erupt simultaneously in a cataclysmic chain reaction that would redefine what we consider a natural disaster. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like something out of a disaster movie, not real life. But here is the sobering truth. Core samples drilled from Pacific seafloor sediments contain layers of volcanic ash and turbidites, which are the telltale signatures of underwater landslides triggered by titanic earthquakes. Those layers appear in rhythmic pulses stretching back over the past 10,000 years. In other words, the catastrophe we might be watching unfold around Axial Seamount could be an ancient pattern that is literally written into the Earth itself. History tends to repeat, especially when it comes to geology. So here we are, watching the most monitored underwater volcano in human history send warning signals that scientists are struggling to interpret. The eruption cycle that once stretched over more than a decade has compressed down to mere months. The Pacific Northwest magmatic network appears to be wired for catastrophe in ways we are only beginning to understand. And the volcano best positioned to light that fuse sits alone on the abyssal plains. 300 miles from the coastlines, it threatens to reshape forever. The question now is whether we are truly listening. The most wired volcano in the world is screaming a warning at us through miles of ocean water. Will Axial's premature eruption stay buried beneath the waves where it cannot hurt anyone? Or are we witnessing the opening chapter of a geological event that could shatter the Pacific Northwest as we know it? I want to hear your thoughts on this. Drop your predictions in the comments below and tell me what you think is going to happen. Do you believe scientists will figure out what is driving this acceleration? Do you think we should be preparing for the worst? Make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because I am going to be covering every single development in this story as it unfolds. We are just one breaking point away from the biggest geological story of the century, and you definitely want to be here when it happens. Stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one.